Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I am doing a book review of Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which is book 2 of the Wayward Children series. Book 1 was Every Heart a Doorway. So in Every Heart a Doorway, we met a group of teenagers who had come back from portal worlds. And in Down Amongst the Sticks and Bones, we get our first look into one of those portal worlds. We have Jack and Jill, whose actual names are Jacqueline and Jillian, go into their portal world in Down Amongst the Sticks and Bones and spend time there and come back. So all of their adventure prior to coming into the school is what is kind of showcased in Down Amongst the Sticks and Bones, or Down Among the Sticks and Bones. I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5. I liked it, but I didn't like it nearly as much as Every Heart a Doorway. And I had kind of anticipated that I might not. Every Heart a Doorway was really nice because it had a lot of themes that I really appreciate about growing up and adolescence. And there was also a little murder subplot, which was interesting. I enjoy fantasy and portal fantasy, but I'm very particular about it. And I knew I wouldn't like that probably as much as a mystery. Also, Jack and Jill were not my favorite side characters in Every Heart a Doorway, so I knew I wasn't going to be as invested in them as, for instance, some of the other characters that I wanted to see their portal worlds. And spoiler, neither of my characters who I loved the most yet have books in their portal world, so kind of disappointed. I want to see them. In the first book, the Every Heart a Doorway, my favorite characters were 2 of the boys present. There was one boy who had been in a fairy world, and he was kicked out when they realized that even though he'd been assigned female at birth, he was actually a boy. And the other was a boy who had been in a skeleton world. Those were my favorite characters from the first book and who I really wanted to see. Jack and Jill, I didn't connect with nearly as much, so I knew going in that I might have mixed feelings about this. My biggest thought on this is it is told very differently, I would say, than the first book in the Wayward Children series, the Every Heart a Doorway. This book, firstly, is fairly short but spans such a huge time period. So we are introduced to the story before Jack and Jill are even born. We are introduced to their parents, who are kind of terrible people. We know from the last book that was kind of the case, but we get more information in who their parents were prior to their birth. We see Jack and Jill's birth, we see some different scenes from their childhood, and then about halfway through, we end up in our portal world. One of the important aspects of the earlier part of the book is to establish that Jacqueline has been given a very feminine role by her parents. Her parents have put her in dresses. Her parents do not allow her to be dirty. Her parents have very much dictated that she is the extreme feminine representation within the twins. Jillian is the extreme masculine representation. She's the one that dad enrolls in sports. She's the one that goes to the fair with dad. She's not allowed to have long hair. She's not allowed to wear dresses. Basically, these parents assigned gender roles to their children because they wanted a boy and girl when they found out they were having twins, and they got 2 girls. So they basically decided Jillian was going to be raised as a boy, except not a boy. We were going to acknowledge that she is biologically female, and that's fine, but we're going to treat her like we would a son and encourage her to do masculine activities. So these characters, that is the setup for the story, and then, of course, if you've read book 1, you know that when they get down to their portal world, both girls get a chance to kind of explore the opposite side of side of the gender of gender. So we have Jillian, who becomes a princess, and Jacqueline, who becomes a mad scientist's apprentice. So somebody who is doing work and getting dirty and grime and grub and dead things, whereas Jillian, who has always had the short hair and been, doing the sports, is suddenly in the fancy dresses, being treated like a princess. And so they have kind of a different role, and they're given a chance to explore who they want to be versus the gender roles that have been assigned to them by their parents. Like Every Heart a Doorway, I think this book has some interesting topics, particularly about gender roles, gender expression, and the roles that our parents put on us, and our ability or inability to push against those roles. So I did enjoy that exploration, but because this book spans so much time, from before the kids are born until they come back out of their portal world at 17 years old, and this is not a long book. I consume this book as an audiobook, and I believe it's 5 hours long. 17 years is a really long span for this story, and it was told in a very omniscient point of view. So we're rarely down in the story. It reminded me kind of like an old fairy tale telling. You have somebody saying, the narrator speaking and saying, well, this is what you need to know, but this is where our story really starts. And you don't have throughout a lot of scenes where you're in with the characters and stuff is happening. You have a few. Particularly, you have, once they get down to the portal world, they spend their very first night in that portal world in the castle with the vampire. And the children are getting to choose whether to go with the vampire or the mad scientist. And that is kind of a scene. You get that. And you get a little bit of setup, but then you don't really see a lot of the lives of Jack and Jill between getting chosen and then this thing that happens later that is why they have to leave the portal worlds. So I felt in some ways like this was more of a info dumpy story than a story I was in. I did love it and it was beautiful, but it was very literary. It didn't feel like a fantasy story that we are with them. It felt like here's a thing and here's the thing and here's the thing and here's the thing. And I'm going, like I said, it took a long time to actually even get in the portal world. I would say it had to have been close to the halfway mark before we even got in the portal world. Not quite the halfway mark, but, significantly into it. Probably more than a quarter in, maybe 3/4. Or a third in. Let's say a third. Again, I listened to it as an audio book, and it just surprised me how long it took to get to the portal world. Because you have the kids, and why their parents are awful, and they should never have had kids. And then they have kids, and what they wanted. The dad wanted a son, the mom wanted a daughter. When they found out they were having twins, they wanted one of each. They don't get that, so this is how they make Jacqueline into a little lady, and Jillian into a tomboy. And then on top of it, they have this relationship that's important with their grandmother in the story and how her interactions affected them. And then we eventually, after all of this, and seeing the trials and difficulties that Jacqueline and Jillian are having because of their assigned gender roles and their inability to deviate from them because of how harshly their parents are enforcing those roles, the social problems. Jillian, she gets to the point where girls don't want to play with her because she's a tomboy, but the boys are like, oh, she has cooties. Jacqueline has friends, but she's not able to engage in her world the same way that Jillian is because she's not allowed to get dirty. So, she kind of envies her sister who's out playing and in the mud and very washable. And Jacqueline actually develops kind of an OCD about germs because of this pristine, you have to keep your dress pristine, you can never get dirty. Whereas, Jillian's out playing in mud puddles and nobody cares. So I guess my thought was I liked the themes we were covering. I didn't necessarily enjoy the journey. I didn't necessarily feel like I was in the world and engaged. I felt like there was a lot of time jumping because we've got a 17-year span where we're just shown little bits and given a lot of narrative dumping. These are told like more classic fairy tales where you have an omniscient narrator and you're not necessarily following one character and what they do and their emotions. We do get some emotions, but I didn't feel like, especially Jillian, we got to know as well. I feel like we did get a little bit more on Jack, and I like Jack a little bit more than Jillian. I think most readers do if you've read the first book. For obvious reasons, Jack is a little bit better of a person than Jillian. They're both suffering difficulties because of their situation, but Jack makes some better choices than Jillian. However, I feel like Jillian didn't really get the redemptiveness I would have liked to have seen in this story about the sisters. I know that there is another story with them in their portal worlds in the future because of what happened in the in the Every Heart a Doorway book, how they found their doorway back. So I am going to continue reading. I do want to see what happened with them, but I would have liked to see more from Jillian, particularly a little bit more redemption from her, a little more sympathy into why she is how she is. I think we really focused on Jack and Jack being interesting and being the better of the twins in some ways. And I felt like we didn't get much focus on Jillian, who is still kind of villainized in this book as well. Again, we are told that it's their parents' fault, which I didn't love, but other than that, we don't really get to see a lot from Jillian and see the true changes in her as well as I would have liked. So this one, I wasn't as impressed with as I would have liked to have been. It'll be interesting to see how the other Portal World books go. If they are set up like this one, I'm probably not going to enjoy them quite as much as I enjoyed Every Heart a Doorway. Every Heart a Doorway I really liked. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and it surprised me how much I was engaged with it. But it is also mostly in our world. The fantasy elements are referenced, and it is more of a murder mystery. Whereas this book is very much kids go into a portal fantasy world, they spend some time, some stuff happens, they come out changed. Which is not necessarily something I like quite as much. So if you have read Down Amongst the Sticks and Bones, do you agree with my feelings? Did you also feel like Every Heart a Doorway was better? Or did you like this better? Did you think that the literary tone in the fairy tale storytelling, is that really your style and something you found more engaging? If you've read the whole series, are most of the books in the series closer to Every Heart a Doorway in the storytelling and structuring, or are they closer to Down Amongst the Sticks and Bones? Was Every Heart a Doorway like, I don't know, a vehicle so that the author can be like, hey, I want to tell you all these Portal World stories, or not, I guess. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what this series is, I guess. And I did overall enjoy it. I didn't like this nearly as much as Every Heart a Doorway. It reminded me of the fairy tales I'd read as a child more than a story I could really engage with. I thought the conversation about gender and gender roles was important, but I was more interested in hearing that from the boy in the fairy world, to be honest, if we're having that discussion of that topic, than I was necessarily seeing that through Jacqueline and Jillian. So, mixed feelings about this book. Entertaining, fine. It wasn't bad. I didn't love the way it was structured. I didn't love the length versus the time in the story. And the literary tone or the storytelling tone wasn't as engaging as I wanted it to be. But cool fantasy world, cool portal, and not in any way bad, just not anything that stood out as much as Every Heart a Doorway did to me. So please leave your comments below if you've read the book in the series, anything I should know about it as I go forward to the next book. Also, if you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe for more content. If you enjoyed this content, please hit a like. It helps with the algorithms. My social media is below if you'd like to connect with me off of YouTube. And in those social media links are links to several places you can find my books. I am a romance writer. I will be branching out into some other genres in the near future, so if you read romance and would like to check me out, those are all connected below. If you are a Kindle Unlimited user, I have several books on Kindle Unlimited you can use, or you can read for free. If you have the Audible Romance package, I also have several books in there that you can read for free. So feel free, if you have either of those, to check out my books. Absolutely free to you. Otherwise, keep a lookout. I do a lot of giveaways. Lots of ways to get into my series and my books because readers are important. All right, guys. This is Jane. I love books. I'll see you next time. Bye.